All Along the Watchtower, Bob Dylan, The Hidden History. Written by Geoffrey Giuliano. Narrated by Geoffrey Giuliano.
Upon reflection, the summer of 1967 seems to hold considerable magic for the people who lived through it, and remarkably for many who didn't. The ever-widening ripples set into motion by that turbulent time, too, still reverberate in the collective consciousness of those open to it. But was it real magic, or simply some kind of hypnotic head trip hundreds of thousands happened to experience at the same moment? In the end, of course, it doesn't really matter. People were forever changed by the 60s, with the summer of 67 being the hook upon which so many hung their hats. Still, the change is what matters, not what caused it. Many would argue the fruit of this unparalleled period doesn't equal the accolades heaped upon it by the so-called liberal left-wing media, and that in fact it was a disgraceful, undisciplined freak show wherein the spoiled sons and daughters of the WW2 generation became unhinged, swallowing exotic drugs, listening to strange music, reading silly books, and lazing about with their friends in shady parks strumming guitars. Even worse, they actively disdained war, talked of God, and most unforgivable of all, rejected the materialistic values their parents invested their lives in. It's true that many of those who traversed those waters ended up very sad, addicted, vacant, unrequited souls. In any revolution, however, there are victims, even one of consciousness, as the late 1960s inevitably was. Of course, if you ask your grandfather about the renaissance of ideas that was ferried down to the planet back then, he'll box your ears and tell you not to be so stupid. But if you ask me, here was a time in which the veil between the material and spiritual was lifted slightly, allowing those with the eyes to see to glimpse the happy forever world beyond. For those who considered psychedelic drugs anything more than a means to an end, let me apologize belatedly for your illusion. LSD, peyote, mescaline, and the like was simply a vehicle for the tiny consciousness of the individual to blast off from the cold, hard world of forms towards the omniscient light sphere of love from which we originally emanate. A vehicle to be jettisoned in favor of a more subtle, permanent carrier once that particular threshold of self had been successfully crossed. That the hippie drug movement of the 60s soon evolved into the Maharishi Hare Krishna, all you need is love, power to the people, think for yourself politic was nothing but good. For along with it came the popularization of such heretofore undercover concepts as environmental and ecological concerns, personal freedom, innate spirituality, women's issues, equal opportunity, civil rights, sexual freedom, animal rights, vegetarianism, children's rights, political activism, artistic exploration, and so much more somewhat less easy to define. Never again would we blindly follow the unenlightened leaders of Western society. You can't put the cat back inside the bag. And once people became more aware, humanity could only move forward. The fact that in hindsight, the hippies of yesteryear are very much the money-grubbing yuppies of today doesn't really diminish the internal evolutionary quickening which came to fruition during the summer of love. For the 60s were only an invitation, a possibility, a chance for attainment, not a guarantee. The rest, as they say, was up to us, and how well we did or are doing is still in many ways yet to be seen. At its basest level, one could argue that we are simply more sophisticated consumers, more polished hedonists, able to discern ever finer categories of wine, cars, clothes, and God knows what. A secretly paranoid Peter Pan generation hiding from time like naughty children from their mommy. But there was also the other side, the millions of people around the world who embraced the opportunities afforded by the 60s and turned them into something more, something bigger, grander, and truly impervious to mean old Mr. Time. When philosophy ceases to become mere table talk and begets an actual lifestyle, only then does it have real value. So if you're still looking for 1967 at the other end of a joint, inside the pages of the electric Kool-Aid acid test, or at your local
Sample complete. Ready to continue?